So let's just go through the introduction for me now that you've all introduced yourself. So I'm going to be your session facilitator for today. My name is Charlene. You can call me Shar. So I'm a workshop facilitator with Hustle and Hills, and I deliver the marketing basics for startups and also the marketing masterclass and the social media sessions, as well as the digital marketing sessions as well. So my background is in recruitment marketing and also digital brand attraction. So a lot of work on how we attract people, talent online, and then of course what the kind of the creation of that, campaigns, done a lot of different campaigns. And then I've also been involved in a lot of music events, marketing and management, so slightly different from marketing to talent, but how we work within the music industry to engage different audiences. So to give you an understanding of that, I've managed Instagram pages, for example, for artists with around nearly a million followers, and then at like 2,000 followers. So kind of the different strategies that we use to engage with those different audiences. And my day job is I work for a company called Deloitte, in diversity consulting, and my background is in law. So I had a Bachelor of Laws and a Master's in Law. Decided that I don't like it, mostly because my parents forced me into it like 15 years ago. But yeah, I'm free of those shackles and kind of in the space I want to be in. So I have a legal background, but don't ask me anything legal. We've got people for those sessions, but anything to do with brand attraction, marketing, I'm the person. So I'll be with you until 11:30. Because I talk a lot, I'm going to keep my phone here, just so I know what the time is and set timers. We'll have a break around 11 o'clock, just a quick break, and then we'll continue until 11:30. So there's a few things that I have to do for today's session. At the end, we need to fill out a feedback form, so I'll send that to you in the chat towards the end of the session. If you fill that out and let me know when that's done, and then we need to upload that. So that is me. So I'm very conversational with these sessions, especially because they're usually less than 10. So anytime you have a question, feel free to engage or pop it in the chat, and I'll keep an eye out for that as we're going through today's session. So today's session, we're going to be looking at what are good marketing examples and what are bad marketing examples. I mean, that's so polar opposite. We'll be discussing different types of marketing examples, and then we'll have a little bit of a discussion at the end and some questions based on some of the things that you're doing, and we'll try to kind of fit some of those examples that we've talked about into you know, what makes sense for you, so that you leave feeling like you've got something specific you can take away. So the first things to kind of consider when we're talking about what is good and bad marketing, for those who are at level 0 when it comes to marketing, is just sometimes going back to the point where you're thinking of what it is, why it's important, why can it benefit your business, how much do you already know about different types of marketing, and then why is marketing really relevant to your business. So those different things are going to be coming up throughout the session, and I think if we take maybe just a few seconds, you can either just think about it or jot it down, those 4 points to consider. So for your particular product or your service, why is it important? Typically because you want to engage with customers. How can it benefit your business? How much do you already know about it? And then why is it relevant to your particular business? So just starting right at the foundation, just thinking about these four core questions. So just have a little bit of a think before we go to the next slide. Okay, so just keep those in as we go. It will make more sense as we're going along. So marketing is an action. It's something that you do actively to promote your business. So I think it was Paul you mentioned, and also maybe Connie, that you've maybe created a website, or you want to create a website, or you've put something together, and then you find that like you kind of make the website or make the Instagram page or a Facebook page or whatever, and they're like, right, I've done that. And then you're like, okay, so now where are the people? Sometimes we think that just putting it together, people are going to come to us. And so we need to remember that it's always an action. And I did that. I made my first website on Wix a few years ago for something that I was working on. I put together this website and I was like, right, I've just spent this time, learned how to put together this website. And Wix is great, Squarespace is great as well. They help you through it. But I just thought, right, now that it's done, everyone's going to obviously flood to my website. I had no idea about kind of SEO and actually promoting the website. And so it's important that you remember that it's an active thing. Sometimes when we think about our product or service, we just think about that and we forget that we actually have to tell people about it, and make it known to different people. So it's not just a brand, a logo, or website. Well, those things can absolutely help. It's not just a brand, a logo, or website. It has to be the step further of telling people about that brand, logo, and website. And I don't know why, but I think sometimes we get a bit I mean, let me know if you don't identify, but I sometimes feel very awkward or uncomfortable telling people about the things that I'm doing, and making it like a really, I'll like post it and like kind of run away. And actually you have to be consistently in conversation with people when you are, you're marketing, because that's essentially what it is. You're telling people about what you're doing. And it's not just sales and advertising. So I split sales and advertising like this. I think Gareth mentioned that he lived in Hymes Park. I don't know if anybody else has been to Walthamstow Market, but when you're walking down Walthamstow Market, maybe not so much now, it's so much nicer now, but when I was growing up, when it was just really just the market, it was I always just remember like loads of people who were like fruit sellers, etc. And I always think of the sales part as, like I said, call him Bob at the fruit stall, like shouting, £10 for whatever, and da, da, da. And you'd be walking past and he's just kind of telling you what it is and kind of almost shouting at you. And that to me is like sales. That's where it's just like a little bit in your face. It's the end product. We want you to buy, want you to buy. Whereas the advertising is if they had maybe a poster or a truck that had, Bob's fruit stall, it's something that you can see. And I always think that marketing is the bridge between the sales and the advertising. So not just that kind of hard sell and not just the showing people, but actually telling people what it is and engaging with people to know how they respond. So that sales, marketing, advertising piece all fits together. So sometimes we focus on just like selling, sometimes we focus on just making things look nice, and letting people see it, but actually telling the story and doing the action of it is really important as well. Marketing is not only customer service. So I know we've all probably been to places where we have had great customer service, but maybe the product or service was not great. And we need to remember that it's not just having good customer service, though it's part of it. We need to make sure that everything is aligned. So the product and the customer service that we're providing. I remember going to this pub restaurant one time in Kent, and they were so lovely, so accommodating, just amazing customer service, but the food was the worst I've ever had in my life. And that's not an exaggeration, it was so bad. None of us finished our food. They were so nice. Did I pay for the full meal? Yeah. Would I recommend anyone to ever go there again? Absolutely not. So even though they had great customer service, it's not good marketing to not have a good product or service. So I wouldn't go back there again. So while it's part of it, we've got to remember that it's not all of it. Marketing is also not just your product or service. Again, it's all of that in tandem. It's the product, service, and customer service. If you have a really good product or service, again, and you're not telling people about it, then it's not helpful. You having your product, having your service, having your website, and nobody knows about it, it's not going to help. And then the other thing is that marketing is not just a social media profile. I kind of touched on this with the brand, logo, or website, but if you have a social media profile, incredible, amazing. But I think sometimes we forget that in this day of like digital marketing and online marketing, we think that, again, either people will flock to it, or that it will almost somehow promote itself, or that just having the profile is enough. And again, it's not just that. And what we'll be talking about is how we work all these things in tandem to make it really successful and effective for what you want. And also, it's not complicated or hard. I think it's really important to remember, if you are a beginner with marketing, we call this marketing basics for a reason, but it is, we want to make it as simple as possible. So we don't want to make it as complicated or hard. It doesn't have to be, or you don't have to be a marketing genius to get it off the ground. I think once you understand some of the foundations of it, you're able to then build up from there for something that works for you. And then of course you'll see and adapt and change certain things, and you'll be able to continue in that way. So that's what marketing is not. Now I want to move on to what marketing is. Someone have a question? No, I just background noise. Okay. When I want to talk about what marketing is, so marketing is, again, a conversation. It's just a good old chinwag with the customer, talking to people, engaging people, telling people about what you've done and what you have, and you all have really interesting stories about why you do what you do. And actually, I think that that's always a really great way to get people engaged. Like Connie, if I was to come to you and talk to you about costume and clothing, I feel like that would be really, really interesting. Or Liz, if I was to say, you know, if I was in one of your classes, or I met you somewhere, I went on social media and you know, you were talking about why you do what you do, and not just maybe the physical benefit of it, but actually the mental benefit of it. I think that that might be something that might be like, actually, I want to actually come to this. I support what they're doing, and I think I can find benefit with it. So having that relationship, I think that because again, things are moving digitally a lot more, unless you have a brick and mortar store, you can still have that good old chinwag with a customer online. So Hustle and Heels, for example, every Monday we have a live where we basically engage with our people who are in our Instagram, for example. We have a live, and that is the same thing. So we're talking about what we're doing. We've got interesting stories that we talk about. We bring on different people, and that's basically the same thing, just kind of letting people into conversation, and letting people know why you do what you do. So you could do a good old chinwag on Facebook Live or Instagram Live, or in a one-to-one or something like that. You're able to have that time, and don't just limit it to in person. You can definitely find a way to do that online as well. Marketing is, of course, also taking negative feedback on board. I don't know if any of you have seen adverts where maybe it says, let me use Andrex, for example, where they say, oh, the new and improved version of Andrex. We spoke to 100 people and 97 of them said Andrex was good, but some of them said to do this, and we've done this, and therefore we've got new and improved. So kind of like taking that feedback and make it new and improved, and they use the new and improved, or we've made these changes, or new feature, taking that negative feedback and almost like spinning it, and then using that as a marketing tool, because that can actually be really powerful as well, because it shows that we listen to you, that kind of thing. We listen to you and we've done this, and this is how it's better now. So, you know, buy the product essentially. So taking negative feedback on board and being able to flip that around, I think is also really, really useful. My favorite is telling your story. So we'll have some examples of how people do that. Oh, I've done that today, but telling your story is so powerful, especially now. So I'm a little bit of a geek when it comes to like marketing and business and that kind of stuff. And I like to look at trends, and I like to look at what works and what doesn't work, and why, like how the changing social climate impacts the way that we market. And one thing that keeps coming up is that at the moment, people are really nosy. Like people just want to know what people are doing behind the product or the service. People kind of want to know who you are and why you did it, and a little bit about your story. And I'm sure if you think of whether it's small businesses or growing business, even like big chains, there's an aspect now of people kind of peeking out from behind the scenes, and people buying into that person at the same rate that they're buying into that particular product or service. And I think a big part of that is social media. We're all completely nosy, but I think that actually it does help. So if I think of a very typical example now that I keep seeing, is having, so sometimes I'm fake vegan, but sometimes I eat vegan meals, trying to be better. Sometimes I eat vegan meals, and you'll find that there are like a lot of now vegan options. And there's one, I can't remember the name of it actually, we bought to try. Their meat substitutes, and it has the two founders on the face of it, or behind on the back. So you can see now that the people behind it are like literally joined to the product or service, and why they do what they do, and why it should be of interest to you. Innocent Smoothie do it. It started with this guy who had this idea and did this, and obviously it's about how comfortable you are with it. But I think that a lot of that now, product, services, founders are coming from behind the scenes. And if you don't want to show your face, you know, finding a way to tell your story in a way that really links that product or service. So I think that's a really powerful way of marketing now that people are really tapping into. So that might be a good way. You know, why do you do what you do? What's the interest behind it? You know, why should we engage with it? You'll see that more and more as we continue this year, next year, and then we'll look at trends again. But at the moment, that's a big part of it, telling your story. And live demonstrations are huge. So I think when we think of live demonstrations, we typically think of maybe like food or something active. But you can do a live demonstration with anything, and it's such an important marketing tool nowadays if you're doing digital marketing of any sort. So that can be showing, you know, a showroom, or doing some yoga poses, or showing how to book you on your website, for example, or doing like a story of how, you know, your product or your service works. So doing something that shows how to engage with you, doing a live demonstration. We've had some where people have done, you know, food demonstrations. You do a cook along, and then they have maybe their product that you can buy after cook along, and they'll say, right, for the next 10 minutes, if you purchase my seasoning, then you get 50% off, something like that. So having a live demonstration and then attaching a really good discount or deal to it, I think is something that really, really can work really well for a lot of people. So let's have a look. Just seeing if anyone is in the chat. Okay. So that's live demonstrations. And a really good story that I have that I really identify with is, I don't know if anybody follows on social media a personality named Tabitha Brown. And she was during the lockdown, she became really popular. She made recipes, and she was really ill, and she decided to cook using more of a plant-based approach. She did it for a while, and she found that she, you know, got a bit better. So she was just sharing her recipes, nothing too kind of intense, just like really simple recipes or substitutes from a plant-based approach, and she grew a huge following. I mean, she's probably like 4 million followers, and it was just from her doing live demonstrations of her food and telling her story about, you know, I was really ill, I decided to give up this for a while and see what would happen, and she's got a huge following because of that. And so that's like the power of like telling your story as a marketing tool, and also having a demonstration of what you do so people can engage with that as a marketing tool as well. So that's live demonstrations and a marketing tool. And even like someone like Emmanuel, like I know that you have a little bit of a different service in that, you know, it's about ride sharing, for example. That could be something that you could use as well, you know, thinking of why did you decide to do a ride sharing, and also then sharing that story of, you know, however, you know, you came to do that, and maybe there's a little bit more, it's more fun, it's safer, etc. That can be something that you could share with that as well. So I'm just typing in the chat to you. Her name is Tabitha Brown. Connie, let me type that in there.
Yeah, trying to find it. Oh, right. Oh, I was spelling.
No problem. And then it's also asking the right questions. So asking the right questions is huge. It's similar to feedback, but I think asking the right questions to your customers for feedback, but also asking the right questions, looking at what other people who are in the industry are doing to you. So there's always going to be someone doing something similar to you, and it's a really unique idea. But asking the right questions and looking at them and saying, right, what are they doing? They're doing X, Y, and Z. How is mine different? What can I provide? What other services can I add to this product or to the service that will make mine stand out a little bit more, or be a little bit more authentic, or feel a little bit more like me, or engage with the audience that I want? So always kind of doing that reviewing process. And you can do it kind of every quarter, every 6 months, every year, however works for you. But have just a time where you review, ask questions, and look at the feedback, and then try to almost kind of add it on. I mean, feedback is a hard one, especially with something you really care about, because you're like, it's great, it's fine. But actually, I always just see it now as like a way to just improve what you already have. So just taking that on board as well. And then marketing finally is the intentional posting on social media, which we discuss. So being very intentional about how you post. And again, we'll go into digital marketing in the other session in depth, but being intentional, not looking at, right, I've got my insights here. If I've got a business page on social media, I've on Instagram, right, looking at when do people engage with me? And obviously that is so easy to find now. You can look at what the times that people engage with you the most, what kind of content people engage with you, being very intentional about the type of features you use on Instagram. Are you going to use Instagram stories, for example? Are you going to use reels? Are you going to just use videos? Are you going to be on TikTok, or are you going to be on just Instagram or Facebook? So being very intentional about thinking, right, where's my audience, or the people who would engage with this content, where would they be? And then creating content around that. So that's talks a little bit of customer profiling as well, but also understanding where your audience is. You can do that by values. So what's their values? You can do that by age, you can do that by location, you can do that by interests, and then look at where people are and try to create content for that particular audience. So a good example of that is looking at breakdowns by location and demographic of online kind of posting. So for example, we know that TikTok is very geared towards kind of younger teens and the Gen Zs, but I'm always on TikTok. I just love watching what people do, and anybody can use TikTok, but it's about how you use it to engage. So just understanding what works for you and the audience that you want to work with. Anyone have any questions? Let me pause there before we move on. Everyone good with that bit so far? Yep. Okay, perfect. So that just gives you a bit of a background. Now we're going to be looking at some examples and why what they did was good, and kind of rip it apart a little bit. And what I do want to say is this one that we've got here, the Dove one. It's really interesting because the Dove have had some great campaigns, and then Dove have had some really awful campaigns. And depending on what part of the world you're in, people have mixed feelings about Dove and Dove products. But I wanted to pull up this one because actually it was a more positive campaign, and the impact it had was more positive. So we'll look at Dove for this example more specifically. So the first one is this campaign, and it was about self-confidence, and it was called Reverse Selfie. And according to Dove, 80% of girls by a certain age, by 13, will have a distorted view of the way they look online. So Unilever owned that brand and took action with a hard-hitting campaign just in April 2021. And the brand wanted to tackle the issue of unrealistic beauty standards in the social media era. So very on topic, a conversation, again, something that is allowing people to tell their stories, but very on topic. A lot of people are having this kind of conversation about how do we market ethically, especially if we're marketing to maybe younger audiences. So the impacts that it had was that it had 1 million plus views on social media fairly quickly, and it also drove an interest to what they called their confidence toolkit. And I was I'm not going to lie, I was a bit pessimistic when I heard of this, because I thought, is it just some products that they want you to buy and say, you know, these will keep you natural? But it was actually, a toolkit. It was just like a PDF where you could fill out and ask yourself questions and do it with your kids, if you had kids, for example. And it was very educational about confidence, and so actually that was actually really helpful. But of course, I'm sure they wouldn't have minded if you then went to another product page and then bought a product, but that's what they did at the first instance. So actually it was a great marketing tool, because their sales did increase from that. And the lesson here is that having a social and relatable message is a powerful marketing tool. So being able to look at something that you care about, or something that's kind of trending, if we want to be really like crude about it, and find a way to engage with that as a marketing tool, that sometimes does work. I always think that authentic marketing works really, really well, and being able to be just tell the truth about what you're doing and why you're doing it, that works. But having a social and relatable message at the moment is a really powerful tool, and seems to be able to engage with a really wide audience. So that's that Dove reverse selfie campaign. And then another one to look at is Craft. So you may have heard of Craft. So Craft creates food products. What they do is, rather than just hard selling their products, sometimes they use Pinterest to share recipes, and it just it feels very much, if you follow them, it feels very much like an online community. And what they do is they create these meals where essentially, so imagine you're on Pinterest and here's my recipe, okay, let's all cook this recipe together, and you have X, Y, and Z and a craft product. And if you don't get that craft product, then your recipe won't turn out like how the recipe is at the end. So it kind of is like community-based sharing. Let's create delicious meals. However, they're still wanting you to buy that craft product without kind of putting it in your face. So it feels like a community, and you can create a community as a marketing tool if you wanted to, or just create a community that you know that engages with your product or service. And for them, Pinterest is a good way to do that, because of the nature of Pinterest is about sharing ideas, sharing recipes. So you'll see these craft recipes and it's like, oh, I'll try that, especially in lockdown, or a lot of people are cooking more now. I'll try that recipe, but in order for me to get the outcome, I need to buy this particular craft product. So it's always in there, that marketing, but it does create a community. So I always think, for marketing, always think about community. Who do you want to be as part of your community, that you know that they like what you do, and they respect what you do, and they actually buy into what you do. So then it feels like more of a solution as opposed to a hard sell. Connie, your question, I'm going to ask it out loud because I'm sure people are thinking it. Is this not unethical? And is that in relating to the Dove one or the Craft one?
Well, the Dove one in particular, because I know Unilever are not an ethical company, and they have problems with human rights and pollution, and it's obviously the only reason Dove are doing it is to make money.
Marketing.
And I feel personally really uncomfortable with that, and I feel uncomfortable like trying to sell something, like trying to say that, oh, I'm for this cause or that cause, in order to try and sell my products. I feel really uncomfortable with that. Even though I know it works. I'm not sure that I could do that.
And that is the challenging thing, isn't it? I think that I personally think that anything that you do as a product owner, as a service owner, as a founder, should always and only align to your values. If I worked well, I don't own Unilever, but I totally agree, because when I was looking at examples, I was like, oh, because I have my own issues with how they market certain things in different countries as well. And so I kind of think, right, as an overall organization, there might be things that they do, but if something has a social context, so bringing it to you as maybe a smaller business owner, if there's something that you care about that has a social context or something that you care about, even if it's not directly related to your product, you can talk about why you care about what you care about, and sometimes that's a good marketing tool if that makes sense for you.
It makes sense. It's just I still feel uncomfortable doing that, and I don't know if I could post a video know it and talk about what I believe in, because there's lots of things that I believe in and that stand up for, but in the back of my mind, I know I'm doing this to sell sell products, and I just don't feel comfortable.
Yeah, and again, you just have to do what you find like what's authentic to you. For some people, they would have no problem.
Yeah, no, I know most people
but
don't.
Some people wouldn't. You just have to do what makes sense for you. And I think that's really important. What we can all do, if we don't use the social aspect as a tool, is you can still tell your story, which is just as impactful. So your story of, you know, why did you do this, or why it matters to you to be able to do what you do. That is more an authentic approach that people can connect with, and I think that then helps you build a community of people where you're then providing a space where you have solutions that you can bring to them, or they trust what you say, and vice versa, you take on their feedback. So to me, that's a much more powerful way of actually creating a community of people that actually trust you and have that similar interest to you as well. So no, super interesting. And I'm like a geek with this stuff. Like I love like understanding why people do, you know, why people use marketing in that way. But for it works. It works.
Yeah, it does.
That's why they're using it. That's why they're using it. Thanks, Connie. Liz, I can just see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's any resources or tools that you could recommend for trying to hone your story, I guess, for want of a better word. I feel like I've got a lot of thoughts around, but I'm not really sure. Yeah, I just need a better way to focus.
Do you know what? That's a really good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that before, but I have done an exercise like it before, but it wasn't necessarily a resource. It was just really me sitting down and splitting up. So like values, like what's important to me, like what are my values as a person, as a product owner, and then like how that fits in with the story that I want to tell and what I want to share about what I want to do, adding my background into it. So it's like values and then background. And then if it's something where people expect you to maybe have some kind of qualification, bringing in the experience, you know, what you've done in it, not just qualification, but experience, what you've done in that background as well, and your experience in that space. I think that's all I did for it when I first did it, but that's a really good question. I can definitely have an explore in the break and see if there's any resources, but I literally just broke those down and wrote that down and thought, what's important for me to, if I had, you know, to do an elevator pitch or just had a few seconds to deliver information, this is what I would say to people. And we can have a look at that one. Did I see a hand? Emmanuel, is that a hand?
Yes, there is a hand. Hiya. So I have a question for you. So as I'm looking at Dove and Craft and them showing good examples of marketing, I'm just thinking it's great, but they have like a very big audience already. They've already built up a following and stuff. For someone like myself that doesn't have a following and is trying to market and trying to get to like a huge audience, what would you say would be like the best way of going around doing that? Because I suppose I don't necessarily know if I can go after what I'd classify as the quote unquote big fish.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think that if you are not at that level, I think what the campaigns are obviously big, but what they're doing behind it, I think, is the more important message. So building community. So for example, if you were building a community digitally, you would probably go to or find a page that you follow that does something, even it's not the same, but something similar, football pages, football communities, and probably engage with them, follow those people, tell them about what you do if there's like groups and communities. So I think like the craft one is about community, creating communities and being able to build on community. So even if you don't have that following, the message is that community is important. So you can start by going into it with the community mindset. I want to be able to build a community of people who engage with this product. Okay, where do I find that community of people? By looking at things, people who do similar things to what I do, and engaging with their audiences, following their audiences, asking their audiences questions, joining Facebook groups, etc. So that's the first thing, would be community. And then the next thing that I think we can take from them is about, like I mentioned, that telling your story part. So it's not necessarily the numbers or the outcome. It's more so looking at what was the concept behind what they did, why they did what they did, and being able to take those concepts of, you know, sharing stories or having a social impact and building community, and looking at which one works for you when you are then going to create your product. We have some more examples, but when you're then going to create your product or service. So all of these should have a different almost way of marketing that you can like pull out from behind the scenes and say, right, this was about community. So now I'm going to go focus on building that community and starting from scratch and building, you know, people who engage with what I do. I'm going to think about what my values are as an organization, how I share that. I'm going to look at what my product is and talk about the good features of my product and why my product is maybe different from other products, or why I developed my products in the way that I did, or what was the reason behind me deciding to create a ride share, and sharing that information with your audience and your community. I think that's more so what we're looking at, as opposed to the bigger numbers. So what's the psychology behind why they've chosen to approach it in that way.
Okay.
Yeah, well, we've got some more examples that we'll go through. Connie mentioned blogging. Absolutely, you can blog. It's a good way of sharing what's important to you, and also I guess it kind of it links to your idea as well, Liz, about being able to tell your story or vlog. My favorite thing at the moment is on social media, you see people, it's so like they're not doing anything important, but people are growing these huge followings of doing the most like day-to-day things. Go to work with me, for example, and you know, it's a form of vlogging, but it's video vlogging in 60 seconds. Come to work with me, and all they do is maybe just put their camera there, and you know, they'll be typing, get up, grab a coffee, maybe go for a walk, talk about the calls they had, talk about the organization they did. And it's a really good way to communicate to people every day, or however you want, about what's important to you and how you do what you do. So blogging or vlogging can also be a really good way to tell that story as well. And people like watching things or reading things, again, about other people and pulling behind their scale. So actually, that's a really good way to do it as well. So yeah, so those are the first two examples. Then, well, do this example and then we'll have a break. Then we've got two examples here. So again, this is campaign focus. So Under Armour, which is about sports. And so what they did was something called the I Will What I Want campaign. And instead of going for what they had done in the past, which was an athlete, I promise you, I don't think I've ever watched an Under Armour commercial before this one. And so what they did was, instead of getting like a normal football or a basketball that they typically would, they had a campaign with a ballerina called Misty Copeland. And what she did in that, I don't know if anyone's seen that that advert, but essentially she read the rejection letter that she'd been given by the American ballet the first time she applied when she was 13, and they told her she had the wrong body for ballet. And essentially she used that as a way to, you know, use that rejection as a way to just get to be really good. And what that campaign was focused on was about, it was I will what I want. So whatever I want to do with my body, whatever I can do, whatever I want to do with my mind, I will try my best to do that. So it's very much about, supposed to be inspiring people and taking people who maybe typically, you know, they wouldn't use, because you wouldn't necessarily, even though what ballerinas do, I'm sure, is more physically challenging than some other sports, but what it was about breaking the mold and using something different to be able to share, again, a story that can impact people. So it was about risk, and you showing risk and breaking away from the norm of how we do things, or how things have been done in the past. And for them, it yielded great impact. And it was also about tapping into different audiences as well. So sometimes with your product or service, we talked about having your community and establishing that very important. But then there'll be a time when maybe you think, gosh, is there somebody that I can collaborate with who's a small business, for example? So if you are a small business, you might see someone else who does something different to you, but maybe you might have some shared demographics and say, right, okay, I will work with this other small business, and we'll work together, even though it sounds like maybe a little bit of a risk, is something that I might not do, but actually there might be some sense in it there as well. So it's just about stepping outside of your comfort zone, doing something that you wouldn't necessarily do, but looking at, you know, maybe what's not being done. Is there an audience that maybe is a little bit forgotten that we can engage with, that might, this product, this service might actually also be a solution for them? So Liz, even with yoga, for example, I have been somebody who's like, I want to like try yoga, but like I've just been terrified to do it because I just feel like everybody who does yoga is like a pro, and so I would never walk into a yoga studio and be like embarrassed myself. That's how I would feel, right? But because you are doing it online, I believe that's what you said, didn't you? You're doing it online, I might be more inclined to do that, and you might decide that you want to talk about it across different audiences, and there might be an audience of people who want to do yoga but have been terrified to do it. It's a great way to reach another audience. So it's just about looking at, you've got your community, but who else can I maybe reach outside of that community? Same for Emmanuel, for example. You have people who maybe love football and want to go, so you might have that community of people who want to go to football. But ride shares are great for like families or groups of people who maybe don't go to football but like would want to go to this game. And so it's about engaging with people who are slightly outside of what you typically would and taking the risk of engaging with that audience. So it's just about having your core, but thinking sometimes about taking a risk as well with that. Emmanuel, is your hand still up? No? Okay, great. And then I'll do Taco Bell and then we'll break. So Taco Bell are an American organization. I think there's one here in the UK actually. And what they do is, of course, tacos. And they have a really conversational tone. And this is another great way of marketing now. I don't know if anybody has noticed, but people don't tend to use very formal language on their social media anymore. Even corporates are a little bit more simple in the way that they speak. But if you are looking at some of these big brands, they really try to speak like how the people that they think will buy their products are speaking. And the conversation and the tone is very colloquial. If you look at it, super colloquial, very simple. Sometimes they make jokes, sometimes they use memes, and you can see that, okay, this is like definitely not just something saying 25% off pizza or whatever. They try to like make it funny and engage with like what's happening, trending on Twitter, and people seem to engage with that really well. So Taco Bell, for example, have nearly 2 million, I think it's more now, on Twitter because of the way that they engage with their audience. So engagement with the audience is important, speaking the language, talking, you know, having jokes, so having a sense of humor, that seems to work now for marketing. So if that's something that appeals to you, the way you speak, the tone in which you speak, the images that you use, that's a really good way of marketing as well, because I think it really shows the fact that you understand your audience, and so that's a way that they have really engaged with people. And you wouldn't necessarily think of Taco Bell just thinking you sell food, but actually they have a really strong social media presence and engage and talk to people, and have a little bit of a really humorous relationship with them. So that's something that you can do. And again, you might not have 1.9 million followers. It's about engagement and sounding like yourself so that you can reach your audience, and being, you know, if it's humor that you need to use that. If you want to be informational and give information, you can be informative, even, you can do that. If you want to be however, whatever works for you, the tone that works for you, the language that works for you, the images that work for you, understanding that, and then being able to share that as a way to engage with your community and with your audience as well. Here are a few examples of bad marketing campaigns. Again, some of these organizations might have done good campaigns, but in terms of what we're looking at again is the psychology behind that we want to avoid. So the first one, I don't know if anybody recognizes this image of that first image here. No. So this was a campaign done by Pepsi. So let's just say it's the product was around kind of food marketing. And this is where jumping on a social bandwagon for fake social impact goes wrong, which is what we were talking about before. So I really like this example as a way of when people do things and they don't think about it and they don't really care about it, they're just jumping on a bandwagon and it goes wrong. So here we have Kendall Jenner of the infamous Jenner Kardashian family. And she was chosen as the brand ambassador for this. And essentially in this advert and the billboard and the videos that went along with it, there was a protest happening and loads of people were clashing and unhappy, and there's police and all that. And then Kendall Jenner walks in to the crowd with a Pepsi, and because she's walked in the crowd with a Pepsi, everyone's like, no, why are we fighting each other? Let's all love each other. And she basically completely, stops any kind of social injustice because of the Pepsi. So this is an example of jumping on a social kind of bandwagon or something that people are talking about, social injustice that goes really wrong, because obviously that's not real life. And that's why, again, authenticity is important. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to just like find something and like, oh, like, I'll talk about this, it's trending. If you don't care about it, if there's something important to you, you're not using it as a way to just, there's a word for it, I've just forgotten the word, but there's a way, you're not just using it as a way to just jump on a social bandwagon. This is the wrong way to do that, because it clearly, no one sat and thought a model, giving a Pepsi to a police officer and that's stopping all this attention in America. Probably not. So that's an example of a really bad way of using something that has social impact to market, because it didn't make sense. Second way is, the second one is by Harvey Nichols. I don't know if anyone's seen this. And essentially it had people with wet patches on their crotch. And the idea was that they were trying to be, this is the example of thinking outside the box, gone wrong. So they were thinking outside the box and they thought, right, what we'll do is we'll show loads of people with wet patches on their crotch to show that they're so excited for our sales that they can't control themselves. So this was real adverts, real advertising that was all over the place, and quickly got shut down because people were like, what? So another wrong way of thinking outside the box. So with thinking outside the box, we want it to make sense. The third one, Paddy Power. And Paddy Power, if you've seen their adverts, they're known for being controversial. So we talked about having a tone, being able to engage with your audience as Taco Bell did, but this is the wrong way to do that. So Paddy Power put billboards saying always bet on black, and put on Floyd Mayweather on there and use that as a campaign. And people were like, this is really inappropriate. They have so many inappropriate adverts, and clearly they know who their audience are, but they really play up to using that humor to a point where maybe it's like, oh, I don't know if this is correct. So again, using that humor and that tone that we talked about before, this is maybe not the best way to do it. The final one is mostly just making sure that you're doing market research and insights and looking at what's happening around you. So this is a Starbucks advert. And what Starbucks did essentially was didn't pay attention enough to what was the social climate or what was happening around that time. So essentially they put, they had just these two citrus flavors here. You can see there's a dragonfly flying towards it and it said collapse into cool. They did this campaign just after September 11th, and people felt like it was insensitive. Now, whether they meant to use that would be awfully sick, but I would hope that they didn't. I think they just maybe didn't think about it enough. And this was launched in New York as well. So you can imagine that, and just not having people on their team to really think about, right, what does this look like? So having the words collapse and having the dragonfly flying towards the two, it just, people were like, this is, you didn't think about this. So making sure again that you're reviewing what you're doing, even if it's unintentional, really thinking about, does this have any other connotation that I don't want it to have, essentially. So this is when you start creating digitally, or, you know, if you're doing posters or anything like that, if you're marketing online, all of these are important. This is a mix of outside advertisements and online advertisements as well. But again, what we're looking at is the story behind it. We've talked about tone, we've talked about community, we've talked about being authentic, telling your story. We want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that makes sense and is you know, just thinking about it a little bit more. So those are some of the areas. And one thing I realized was I wanted to talk about this as well. So I've just moved it from another slide because it's important to mention. In marketing, and some of you might be familiar, we have the what we call the tofu, the mofu, the mofu, and the bofu. So the top of the funnel, the middle of the funnel, and the bottom of the funnel. So I think this is great because it gives you some activities that you can do at different stages of the funnel. So at the top of the funnel, we have awareness. So this is campaigns, doing your research, again, looking at what's going on in the similar market than you. You could do events, advertising, trade shows, blogs, webinars, direct mail, viral campaigns, social media mentions, etc. And that is just so people know that you're there. And I think that's where a lot of us are when it comes to where we are with our products. So you can use one of these coupled with whether it's your tone, your story, your experience. You can use one of these as a way to create awareness about what you do, especially again if you're building that community or you're trying to find your audience. You can use trade shows as a way to start, for example. Do free webinars for people to join in, which is that kind of talking aspect and being able to share your information. Direct mail, so you can use a tool that works for you. A lot of people use, what's it called? I just forgot its name. It will come to me. A lot of people use automated email shots that might not work for you, but it's just about creating awareness, telling people you're there. MailChimp, yeah, that's it, MailChimp. Telling people that you're there and letting people, you know, have an understanding of what you do. I think, Connie, you probably have to use multiple tools and see what works best for you. But yeah, sometimes you'll end up zoning in on one thing, but you can use multiple tools. So awareness, so just creating that awareness. Then we move on to what they call the MOFU, the middle of the funnel, which is around interest and consideration. So once people know about it, say you've decided you're going to build your social media page, or you're going to, even outside of social media, share with people what you do, and they're aware of it, they can see it. How do we then get into the interest of them wanting to engage with it? So with this, that's where the community engagement side comes into it, and people knowing you a little bit more, introduction and positioning. Okay, where do you position yourself when it comes to cost? Where do you position yourself when it comes to what they get for your product or your services? How do you target your content? Do you offer, for example, Liz, free classes? Do you do, you know, one-to-one sessions, whatever it is for you? Connie, you may decide that maybe, and the way that you showcase your clothes, there might be a way that you can do it that might, you know, drum interest. Say, oh, maybe I want to try this, for example. Same for Emmanuel, same for Paul. Like, is there something that you can do to get people from the point of knowing where it is to the point of actually interest? Like, I'm interested in what you're doing, and that's a little bit more targeted. And when we move on from interest, we get into consideration. This is when people are thinking of doing it. I'm interested, I'm aware of it, I know you're there, and I'm interested in what you're doing. Now I'm going to think about, do I actually want to you know, make the purchase? So with that, you're going to be sharing information around the product and specials. So what do you do? You're going to want to do specials, for example. You're going to look at maybe more specific email trials, free trials, so email campaigns, free trials, things that will make people be more inclined to kind of go over that line of thinking about it to actually engaging with you. And then moving to what they call the BOFU, the bottom of the funnel, the intent, the evaluation, and the purchase. So the intent is you can use product demos, that lives we talked about, shopping carts if you like that. Shopping carts actually work, but a lot of people feel really uncomfortable with those. So with shopping carts, that means that, you know, when you put something in a shopping cart and it reminds you, like, you have an hour left to make this purchase, you get the email, so you can do that. And then it's a reminder essentially. And then the evaluation, the purchase, moving from the middle of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel, is about making sure that you've shown them that your product is worth buying, and that they get something from it. And so all of these areas, from awareness, where I think a lot of us are, it's about using some of these tools and pairing that with your tone and your story and your way of showing that your product is something that is important and necessary and providing a solution. All of the stuff we talked about, pairing it with actually one of these practical marketing activities to be able to reach your audience. And it might be the case that you are trying different things for a while, but actually then you zoom into something that's a little bit more specific to your audience and see what people engage with. If you use MailChimp or something similar, usually you can get analytics on what people like and what people engage with, but you're able to then kind of look at, right, actually people didn't open this, or maybe what I said, it didn't really resonate with them when I was sharing information about my product or the service, so I'll try something else. So this funnel, I think, is really key. You're able to, if you want, you can obviously note it down, screenshot it, but it gives you just examples of things you can do at each stage as people are going through that marketing funnel. Pair that with your story, etc., or what you want to share about your product or service, and it's a way for people to kind of have that together, and be able to share your story in a format or in an activity that engages with the audience or the community that you're trying to build to engage with you. So that's some marketing activities. Anyone have any questions on marketing activities? No? Okay.
I think I've got one question.
Yeah, go for it.
Just kind of goes back down to what I was saying earlier on. So I take it with all of this market activity, you want to target like a small particular group first and foremost and raise awareness that way.
Yes.
And build up, like you said, the community like that through that thing. So you wouldn't try and spread yourself wide and thin. You would.
I think that for me, if I think of marketing, doing wide and thin, it works sometimes for awareness, but I think it's about what do you want from that awareness? Because sometimes people do things just for people to see in brand awareness, but you are wanting to have people engage with your service. And so I think that having a more steady approach to building that, I think, kind of builds trust and also builds an understanding of what you do. And people are just more likely to, when you put out something or you say something, they're more likely to engage with it because they feel like they you know, it's been more of a structured approach to growing that audience. So I always think, you know, if you can do something that goes really like touches a lot of people, engages with a lot of people, or reaches the emails or a lot of people, or the social media accounts of a lot of people, absolutely fine. And if you can do that, absolutely do that, even if it's not pay-per-click. You can definitely do that. But I think that sometimes having that on top of maybe a more targeted approach, looking at people who are already interested in that kind of thing, I think that can sometimes help, because you already know that you have people who, I'm already interested in this. The awareness is just so other people know it's there. So you can definitely do both. But I think for something like what you're doing, there's already going to be people who are probably looking for something like that, you know, and so it's about engaging with those audiences who like sports, like away games, maybe families, groups of friends who want to go to games, etc. That would be a way to engage. I don't know kind of what you started doing so far in terms of engaging or trying to find them. I don't know if you mind sharing, and we can look at some of what you've done so far.
So my background is I'm a programmer. So I've just essentially been building the platform.
Yeah,
But in terms of marketing or anything else, I haven't actually done anything like that. So hence why I'm going on these sort of courses to sort of help fill in those gaps. I mean, I've got like that, the social media handles and the URL names and stuff like that, but like of their actual marketing activities and getting that, I'm putting out that call to action. I haven't actually done it because I'm still trying to. I mean, I understand who my target audience is because there's a ton of them, but it's about, I suppose I need to break that down into smaller segments and then figure out which segment I need to target first as the most receptive. So that's the kind of journey I'm on now. And then once I figure that out, then I need to understand how best to go about targeting them.
Yeah, so I always think with, because I think we have another session on customer profiling, but if you're able to think of 3 different personas of people who you think that this would work for. So immediately, for some reason, I thought of families or groups of friends who are wanting to go, for example. You can then also look at maybe age demographic, maybe if you're a parent and you had a teenager who wanted to go to a game, maybe 18 or 17-year-old, 18-year-old, maybe you feel more comfortable if they went in a group of people, for example. So kind of looking at that profile, breaking that down a little bit more, and then thinking, okay, these people that I want to engage with, where are they likely to be? So let's just take the parent example, right? There are different types of parent blogs, etc. on the different types of websites that you could promote an app like this on, that actually, that even though they may not, this is obviously a huge generalization, they may not have football as priority, they'll maybe think, oh, actually, if I was to go with a group, or my daughter or my son or whoever was to go with the group in a ride share, I maybe feel more comfortable. So it's just about thinking of your different kind of audiences. Where would they be? So where would they likely to spend time? It might be Facebook groups. So you join that Facebook group and you look at what people are wanting, and you might do a focus group, for example. And also, let's not forget offline. So today's marketing basics, so we're not just looking at online, offline as well, community centers. If you were to go to, for example, I live across a big field, people play football there on a Saturday. How do you get that information across to those people? Is it a case of calling up the clubs and saying, right, if you do have people who are wanting to go to games, we're developing this app, and so, you know, if they want to go to games, they can, you know, do X, Y, and Z, and, you know, you'll be able to, you know, go to the game via rideshare. So it's just about thinking about those different audiences and where they are going to be, and then making sure that you get to those places to engage with them, I think is the most important thing.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, it does.
Definitely come to some of the other marketing sessions if you can, because then we'll go into more detail. But I think as a start, the awareness, just think, who am I trying to engage with and where are they going to be? And then how can I get the information in front of them to build that community of people? I think is a good approach for that. So ride shares, I think of, are about convenience of just like sustainability and efficiency, and also it's a little bit cheaper as well. And so that could be another way that you can, it's cost effective. And if you're going with a group of people, it might be safer. So I think that you think of what is it for, and then you can kind of use those as a way to highlight what you're trying to do.